all for coming to this event that we're hosting on free trade. My name's Annie Rothel, and I'm the Interim Director for the Center on Rights Development. And we're having this event today in co-production with LASA. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Seligman. I'm president of the Latin American Studies Association, known as LASA, and we've partnered with CORD to put on this panel today.
And for those of you who don't know, the Center on Rights Development is a nonprofit that's housed here at DU, and we work on doing education advocacy events here for the greater community and as well as Corbell. I'll put a plug out there to check our website and be sure that you follow. We have our symposium coming up in the first 4 weeks of next quarter. Our topic this year is water security, which fits in of our year-long theme, which is food and water insecurity in the U.S. and globally. So be sure to check out the website. I'm going to pass around, this is a photo release form, so that if we catch you beautiful, intriguing faces on camera, permission that we can put it up on our website. And also this is our listserv sign-up sheet, so if you are not already on the listserv, we try really hard not to send you 5 emails every day, so we don't want to fill up your inbox, but it will keep you in tune with the other events that we have coming up. So if you can please fill these out, I will send them around.
And last thing I'll just say about LASA is, unlike CORD, which is an academic center, LASA is a student group, so we do have weekly charlas, which we call our Tuesday night events, where we have snacks, practice our Spanish. We also have some volunteer opportunities, so check out our LASA portfolio in the portfolio community site.
And so with that, I want to thank you. Other reminder that CORD, we're selling mugs that we have. I don't know if any of you saw them before the holidays, but our lovely CORD staff is selling them back there, so be sure to stop by afterwards. You can get 1 for $10 or 2 for $16, so you can visit those ladies. And with that, I want to thank Professor Holland for agreeing to moderate the panelists today, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks. I guess I'll start by introducing our panel, and thank you all to all three for joining us. We have, first of all, to my far right, Dr. Kishore Kulkarni, who is professor of economics at Metro State College of Denver, and also has taught here for many years, has taught economics here at Corbell. He serves as the editor of the Indian Journal of Economics and Business, and he is the author of over 100 journal articles and 8 books. He has special research interests in macro-monetary theory and international economic issues as related to developing countries, particularly India. And then in the middle here, we have Sasha Brieger-Busch, who earned her PhD in the International Studies program here at Corbell, and now she is teaching at Corbell. And her areas of expertise include international political economy, development studies, global financial markets, food and farming, and political theory. And I hear you're also an expert cook.
I am. I'm a really good cook. That's to my own horn. Yeah, thank you.
So she really knows a lot about food and farming. And her book, Derivatives and Development, A Political Economy of Global Finance, Farming, and Poverty, is coming out in the summer. And we have, to my immediate right, Kara Martinez of the Denver Justice and Peace Committee, a nonprofit organization which is dedicated to promoting human rights, economic justice, and lasting peace in Latin America. And she is a longtime and very dedicated member of the DJPC. She's currently on the Advocacy Committee and has served as program director of the DJPC. She has a master's degree also from Corbell in international human rights, and she teaches international relations and Latin American studies at the online university, American Public University. And she has been a Peace Corps volunteer in Belize and is now on the board of directors of International Friends of Belize, which is a nonprofit that provides secondary school scholarships and grants for community development. Thank you all for being here. I think we'll begin then, since we have different positions on free trade, and we have a real opportunity here to learn a lot about the pros and cons and who's affected by free trade agreements. I think what we'll do is start with Sasha in the middle, perhaps, and then we'll go to Dr. Kulkarni and then Kara to give us a kind of even balanced view on the trade agreements. So Sasha, if you'd like to begin.
Great. Thanks so much to everyone for being here today, and to CORD for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I'm going to walk a little bit of a tightrope here, trying not to step on Professor Kulkarni's toes or Kara's toes, and try not to talk about what they are also going to speak about. So without further ado, what I thought I would do today is to kind of give a brief outline of what these FTAs with Panama and Colombia propose in the context of agriculture and food. And I'd like to hit on some of the broad points, general discussion of what these FTAs potentially mean for food security for both the urban poor as well as the rural poor in Panama and Colombia. And then I will give over the table to my colleagues here. So the first thing I think that should be noted is that Panama's FTA is already in effect. It was signed by the United States in October of 2011, while Colombia's is still in a proposal form, from what I understand. It has yet to be approved. So it's important to note that there are different stages of approval here across these agreements. That said, there are a lot of similarities across the Colombian and Panamanian FTAs in the context of what they propose for agriculture. In short, both of these FTAs promote massive cuts in agricultural tariffs across a whole range of crops. And food products. So we're talking not only cereal and food crops, but also processed foods, fruits and vegetables, animal feed, among other kinds of agricultural products. So for about the U.S. Trade Representatives tells us that for both of these agreements, roughly 50% of products, agricultural products traded between the U.S. and then Colombia and Panama will be tariff-free immediately upon the agreement, while there are a number of other crops that will see tariffs phased out over time. So for example, on wheat and rice in both countries, tariffs will be phased out immediately upon signing the agreement, whereas for corn and certain kinds of soy products, we'll see some tariffs remain in place but gradually removed over the course of the next decade or so. The USTR tells us that in 15 years, all tariffs on a whole range of commodity and agricultural goods will be completely eliminated. So we're talking wheat, rice, corn, beef, chicken, processed derivations of all of those, fruits and vegetables, also coffee and sugar, among a whole host of other crops. Now, as I'm sure Professor Kulkarni will discuss with you, one of the big benefits, proposed benefits of these FTAs for the people of Panama and Colombia are the idea that potentially by reducing tariffs, food might become cheaper, and that this might have a disproportionate benefit for the urban and the rural poor who spend a disproportionate amount of their income on food. Now, I'm going to be the naysayer here, the general naysayer. It's my opinion that these FTAs will probably create food insecurity rather than the security that has been promised. And the insecurity that may come from these FTAs, I think, stems from one big process and dynamic that results as a consequence of implementing free trade in food. That what we will see is the displacement of domestic production by foreign production. So in other words, right, farmers in Panama and Colombia will stop producing or will produce less than they did previously, with their crops being displaced by exports from the United States. We'll see this likely in wheat, in rice, in corn, in animal feed, and a series of fruit and vegetable contexts. Now, on the one hand, of course, you might argue that displacing domestic production with foreign production might bring lower prices. This is the supposed benefit of free trade. However, I think it creates two dynamics that could potentially result in food insecurity instead. In the first place, these free trade agreements might result in peasant farmers going hungry. Right, that one of the big impacts of displacing domestic production with foreign production is that higher cost producers, who often are very small subsistence level or small commercial producers, that these folks may go out of business or may have to reduce their crop production. Now, this will mean lower incomes and also potentially food insecurity for these farm families who no longer can rely on selling their crops in the local market for a livelihood. In addition, there are huge systems of campesino or agricultural labor in both countries, and as small farmers reduce their crop production or go out of business because they can't compete with farms in the United States, we may also see rural unemployment rise for day laborers and agricultural laborers who, because of their loss of income, will be unable to procure as much food. Now, the second issue, so we have this displacement of domestic by foreign production, which results in potential insecurity in the farm sector itself. In addition, opening up to free trade creates a series of vulnerabilities for both the urban and the rural poor. Free trade in agriculture means that you're reliant on world markets for the production and procurement of food. And so consumers, eaters in Panama and Colombia are much more vulnerable to global shocks. Now, there's two different kinds of shock that I'd like to call your attention to that become problematic in the context of relying on foreigners for food provision. The first is any kind of a natural disaster or a shock that disrupts transportation infrastructure. We saw this, for example, in Haiti with the earthquake. As ports were destroyed, Haiti relying on the world market for the procurement of rice, we saw many people in Port-au-Prince and other areas in Haiti go hungry simply because food could not be imported into Haiti due to the supply disruption. So that's one issue. And the second issue, one that's rather dear to my heart because I do look a lot at derivatives markets and issues of volatility, is the incredible volatility of global food markets. And so when we reduce tariff barriers and displace domestic production with foreign production, right, eaters become more vulnerable to global price shocks. Now, as many of you might know, the last several years we've witnessed unprecedented increases in global food prices. Currently today, food prices are somewhat lower than they had been over the past year or so, but we're still seeing food prices that are over 100% higher than they were in their 2002 to 2004 average. Again, this is lower than they were potentially last summer and during the summer of 2007 and 8. However, this food price volatility on the global market will be able to be more directly passed through to local consumers in Panama and Colombia as a consequence of the reduction in trade barriers. So I'm just going to elaborate slightly, give you guys some data to kind of build on these ideas. I wanted to talk a little bit first about farmers and how displacing farmers might end up creating food insecurity in the farm sector. Now, in Colombia, it's estimated that about 46% of the population is poor, and this number rises to 64% when we look at the rural population. Now, taking into account that the poor are more vulnerable to food price shocks than others because they spend a disproportionate amount of their income on food, these figures in and of themselves are very troubling. We have a population that is already relatively impoverished that might become more so as a consequence of both their livelihoods being removed and becoming reliant on global markets for food procurement. In Panama, 28.6% of the population is considered to be poor, and that number rises to 45% in rural areas. So in both countries, we see a much higher concentration of poverty in rural areas, really speaking to the potential insecurity that could result as small farm livelihoods are displaced and small rural farmers and their families come to rely on global markets for food.